The wrench slipped from Maya Chun's oil-stained fingers as the coffee shop's espresso machine hissed its final breath. Steam billowed around her face, carrying the bitter scent of burnt coffee beans and mechanical failure. She cursed under her breath in Mandarin, the same words her grandmother used when the rice cooker rebelled during Sunday dinners. The morning rush at Coastline Cafe was about to begin, and she was their only hope of salvation. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. "How bad is it, Maya?" called Rebecca Santos from behind the counter, her voice tight with the kind of worry that comes from knowing your rent depends on functioning equipment. Rebecca had hired Maya 6 months ago, not for her barista skills, which were admittedly non-existent, but for her uncanny ability to resurrect dying machines. Coffee grinders, ice cream makers, ancient cash registers that predated the internet. Maya could coax life from any mechanical heart. Maya wiped her hands on the burgundy apron that never quite fit right over her small frame and peered into the espresso machine's chrome-plated soul. The problem was deeper than she'd initially diagnosed. The heating element had finally surrendered after years of faithful service. But the real issue lay in the pump system, a cascade failure that would require 3 hours and parts she wasn't sure Rebecca could afford. "Give me until 10, Maya," sighed, already calculating the sequence of repairs in her mind. She had developed this ability during her 8 years in the Navy, back when she was Petty Officer Chun, back when people called her Phoenix because she could bring any piece of equipment back from the dead, back when her hands had worked on radar systems worth millions instead of coffee machines worth hundreds. The bell above the door chimed, and Maya glanced up to see the morning's first customers filtering in. A woman in scrubs, probably ending a night shift at the nearby hospital. An elderly man with paint under his fingernails who came in every Tuesday for a black coffee and a blueberry muffin. And then, settling into the corner booth, table 12, a man who made Maya's breath catch in her throat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of posture that screamed military, even in civilian clothes. His hair was regulation short, and his eyes swept the room with the methodical precision of someone trained to assess threats and exits. But it wasn't his obvious military bearing that made Maya's hands tremble as she reached for her toolbox. It was the way he moved, like water finding its path, like someone who had learned to be invisible while remaining deadly. Maya had worked alongside men like him during her final deployment, shadows who appeared and disappeared from forward operating bases without explanation, whose mission briefings were classified above her clearance level. She had repaired their communication equipment, their night vision systems, their weapons that bore no serial numbers and no official designations. She had learned not to ask questions, but she had also learned to recognize the signs. Special operations. Probably Navy SEALs, based on the way he unconsciously scanned the waterline visible through the cafe's large windows. Rebecca approached table 12 with her practiced customer service smile, the one that had convinced countless tourists to try their house special despite the cafe's humble appearance. The man ordered black coffee and asked for the Wi-Fi password, his voice carrying the slight rasp that comes from years of breathing salt water and gun smoke. Maya tried to focus on the espresso machine's wounded internals, but her peripheral vision kept tracking the stranger. He had pulled out a laptop, but his fingers weren't typing. Instead, he was watching the screen with the intensity of someone monitoring communications, someone waiting for orders or intelligence that would never come through normal channels. Heating element came free with more resistance than Maya expected, and she had to brace herself against the counter to maintain leverage. The motion caught the stranger's attention, and for a moment, their eyes met across the cafe's warm, coffee-scented space. Maya looked away quickly, but not before she saw something flicker in his expression. Recognition? Impossible. She had been careful to fade into civilian life, to become invisible in the way that only veterans truly understood. Her DD-214 discharge papers were buried in a file cabinet at home, her service record sealed behind bureaucratic walls. She was just Maya, the equipment repair woman now, not Petty Officer Chun, not Phoenix, but the stranger's gaze lingered, and Maya felt the familiar weight of being seen, truly seen. For the first time in months, the cafe door chimed again, admitting the pre-work rush. Rebecca moved between tables with practiced efficiency, but Maya could see the stress building around her eyes. The espresso machine's continued silence meant lost revenue, disappointed customers, and the kind of financial pressure that kept small business owners awake at night. Maya's hands worked faster, muscle memory guiding her through the delicate process of installing the new heating element she'd retrieved from her van. She had learned to stock common replacement parts after her third emergency call to a bakery at 5 in the morning. When a broken mixer threatened to ruin a wedding cake order, the work required total concentration, but Maya remained acutely aware of table 12. The stranger had closed his laptop and was now simply sitting, hands wrapped around his coffee cup, watching the morning light play across the harbor outside. There was a stillness about him that spoke of infinite patience, of someone who had spent countless hours in observation posts and sniper hides, learning to become part of the landscape. Maya had known operators like him during her time at Naval Special Warfare Command, though she had never been officially assigned there. Her security clearance and technical expertise had made her valuable for certain projects, repairs that required both skill and discretion. She remembered the weight of their silence, the way they carried secrets like physical burdens. The pump assembly required delicate calibration, and Maya lost herself in the precise adjustments of pressure and timing. This was her meditation now. The way she quieted the voices that sometimes woke her at 3 in the morning, the way she channeled the restless energy that civilian life couldn't quite contain. "Excuse me," a voice said behind her, and Maya's hands went completely still. She turned to find the stranger from table 12, standing just close enough to see her work, but far enough away to respect her space. Up close, she could see the small scars that marked his hands, the kind that came from fast roping and explosive breaches, from handling equipment under conditions where mistakes meant death. "I couldn't help but notice your technique," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You work like someone with formal training." Maya's throat felt suddenly dry. "Community college," she lied, the same cover story she had used for 6 months. "Auto repair program." The stranger nodded, but his eyes held that same flicker of recognition she had noticed earlier. "Coffee machines are different from cars," he observed. "Equipment is equipment," Maya replied, echoing words she had heard 100 times during technical training. "You learn the principles, you can fix anything." It was true, but it was also incomplete. Maya had learned principles that went far beyond civilian repair work. She had learned to troubleshoot radar systems while under fire, to repair satellite communications equipment in conditions that would challenge a trained technician with unlimited time and resources. She had learned to make impossibly complex systems work with whatever parts she could scavenge. Because mission failure was not an option, the stranger seemed to hear the unspoken parts of her statement. He studied her face with the kind of attention that made Maya feel transparent, as if he could read her service record in the way she held her shoulders, the precision of her movements, the calluses on her hands. "I'm David," he said finally, extending his hand. Maya hesitated for a heartbeat before accepting the handshake. His grip was firm, but not aggressive, the kind of controlled strength that spoke of discipline and training. "Maya," she replied. "Maya," David repeated, as if testing. "The weight of the name. That's a beautiful name. Does it mean anything special?" The question was casual, conversational, but Maya caught the undertone of professional interest. She had heard that same tone during security interviews, when investigators probed for details that might compromise operational security. illusion. Maya said, because the truth was easier than a lie. In Sanskrit, it means illusion or magic. David's smile was enigmatic. Fitting, he said, for someone who makes broken things work like magic. Maya turned back to the espresso machine, but her hands were no longer steady. There was something in David's voice, in the way he had positioned himself, that suggested this conversation was more than casual customer interaction. She had spent too many years in classified environments not to recognize the careful dance of information gathering. The heating element finally clicked into place, and Maya began the process of reassembling the machine's complex internal architecture. Each component had to be positioned precisely, every connection tested for proper contact and tension. It was work that required both technical knowledge and intuitive understanding of mechanical relationships. "You know," David said conversationally, still standing close enough to observe her work, "I once knew someone with similar skills, Navy technician, if I remember correctly. Had a reputation for fixing impossible problems under impossible conditions." Maya's wrench slipped, scratching the chrome surface of the water reservoir. The sound was small, barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise, but David caught it. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly, the kind of micro-expression that trained observers learn to read like written text. "Navy has good technical training programs," Maya said carefully, not quite looking at David but aware of his every movement in her peripheral vision. "The best," David agreed. "Especially for the ratings that work with special warfare units. They see equipment that most technicians never encounter, learn to work under conditions that would challenge anyone." Maya's hands had gone completely still. The wrench hung suspended above the heating element housing, and she could feel her heartbeat accelerating in the way that meant fight or flight responses were kicking in. David was probing, testing, seeing how much she would reveal. "I wouldn't know about that," Maya said, but her voice carried a note of tension that neither of them missed. David was quiet for a moment, and Maya could feel him weighing his next words carefully. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, more personal. "Her call sign was Phoenix," he said, almost whispered. "She could bring anything back from the dead." Maya's wrench clattered to the floor. The sound seemed to echo in the sudden silence that fell between them. Maya stared at the chrome surface of the espresso machine, seeing her distorted reflection multiplied in its polished curves. Her heart was hammering now, and her mouth felt cotton-dry. No one in civilian life knew her call sign. She had been careful, methodical about separating her military identity from her new life. Phoenix had died the day she signed her discharge. Papers, buried under layers of bureaucratic paperwork and deliberate forgetting. But David knew, which meant he wasn't just any special operations veteran. He was someone who had been there, someone who had worked with her or knew people who had. Someone from her past who had tracked her down for reasons she couldn't begin to guess. Maya bent to retrieve the wrench, using the moment to gather her composure and consider her options. She could deny everything, maintain her cover story, and hope David would respect her obvious desire for anonymity. She could confirm his suspicions and hope he was here for benign reasons. Or she could run, abandon the half-repaired espresso machine, and disappear the way she had learned during survival training. But Rebecca was counting on her, and Maya had never left a job unfinished. She straightened slowly, wrench in hand, and met David's eyes directly for the first time since he had approached her workstation. "I think you have me confused with someone else," she said, but they both knew it was a lie. David nodded slowly, as if accepting her need for deniability. "My mistake," he said. "But if you ever were in the Navy, if you ever worked with special warfare units, you'd understand why I might be here." Maya's grip tightened on the wrench. "And why might that be?" "Because Phoenix is needed again," David said quietly. "Because there's equipment that needs fixing, and the stakes are higher than broken coffee machines." Maya's apartment was a study in controlled contradiction. The living room appeared perfectly civilian IKEA furniture arranged with careful casualness, abstract paintings from local artists, a bookshelf filled with technical manuals disguised between best-selling novels and cookbooks she never used. But anyone who looked closely would notice the details that betrayed her true nature: the way every chair faced the door, the reinforced locks that belonged on a safe house, the escape route she had unconsciously planned through the bedroom window to the fire. Escape beyond. She sat at her kitchen table now, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had gone cold an hour ago, staring at the business card David had left on table 12 after their cryptic conversation. It was plain white cardstock with only a phone number embossed in simple black numerals. No name, no company, no identifying marks that would mean anything to civilian eyes. But Maya recognized it as government issue, the kind of anonymous contact card that meant official business conducted in unofficial ways. The espresso machine at Coastline Cafe had purred back to life 30 minutes after David disappeared, much to Rebecca's relief and the morning rush's caffeine-dependent gratitude. Maya had finished the repair with methodical precision, testing every function twice, calibrating the pressure and temperature to optimal specifications. It was make work, really, a way to keep her hands busy while her mind processed the implications of David's knowledge. Phoenix. The name echoed in the silence of her apartment, like a ghost refusing to stay buried. She had earned that call sign during her second deployment, after she had somehow coaxed a critical radar system back to operational status, using nothing but spare parts cannibalized from 3 different pieces of broken equipment. The system had been dead for 18 hours, leaving a forward operating base blind to incoming threats. Maya had worked for 14 straight hours, fueled by military-grade coffee and the knowledge that lives depended on her success, when the radar screen flickered back to life, painting a clear picture of the surrounding terrain and the enemy positions that had been moving undetected in the darkness. Her commanding officer had watched in amazement as Maya literally brought the dead system back to life. "Jesus, Chun," he had said, shaking his head in disbelief. "You're like a damn phoenix. You make things rise from the ashes." The nickname had stuck, spreading through the tight community of technicians and special operations personnel who worked in the gray areas between official military operations and classified projects that didn't officially exist. Phoenix became her identity, more real than the name on her birth certificate, more true than the civilian life she had planned to return to someday. But someday had arrived with the weight of decisions Maya hadn't been prepared to make. She reached across the table and picked up a photograph that usually lived in the drawer with her spare batteries and emergency cash. The picture showed her standing next to a Humvee in Afghanistan, her face younger and harder, her eyes holding a confidence that civilian life had slowly eroded. Beside her stood Tommy Rodriguez, her best friend and occasional partner in impossible repairs, grinning with the kind of joy that only came from cheating death and making mission-critical equipment work against all odds. Tommy had been killed by an IED 6 months after the photo was taken, along with 2 other technicians who had been riding in a convoy that Maya was supposed to have joined. She had stayed behind to finish calibrating a communications array, a routine job that had somehow saved her life and ended theirs. The randomness of survival in a combat zone was something Maya had never quite learned to process, even with the help of VA counselors who spoke in therapeutic language about survivors' guilt and post-traumatic stress. Maya set the photograph down and walked to her bedroom closet, pushing aside the civilian clothes that had become her uniform of concealment. In the back corner, wrapped in a canvas sea bag that smelled faintly of salt and diesel fuel, were the parts of her life she had tried to leave behind. Her dress blues, still crisp despite years of storage. Her ribbons and decorations, earned through competence and courage under conditions most people couldn't imagine. Her technical manuals, annotated with notes written in her careful handwriting. documenting procedures and modifications that existed nowhere in official documentation. At the bottom of the sea bag, nestled in a foam-lined case that had once held sensitive optical equipment, was the real treasure, a collection of specialized tools that had been custom-made for her unique skill set. These weren't standard Navy issue. They had been crafted by a master machinist in Virginia Beach who understood the needs of technicians working on classified systems. Each tool was precisely balanced, designed for specific applications that bridged the gap between delicate electronics and robust military hardware. Maya lifted the tool case from its resting place and set it on her bed, running her fingers over the familiar weight and texture of instruments that had once been extensions of her hands. She hadn't opened the case in 6 months, but muscle memory guided her through the ritual of checking each tool for corrosion or damage. Everything was perfect, maintained by habits that ran deeper than conscious thought. Her phone buzzed on the Vazdan nightstand, displaying a text from Rebecca. Machine running perfectly. You're a lifesaver. See you tomorrow? Maya typed back a confirmation, but her mind was elsewhere, processing the implications of David's appearance and his knowledge of her former identity. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Something was happening in the classified world she had left behind, something that required her specific skills. The thought both terrified and excited her. Maya had tried to embrace civilian life with the same methodical approach she brought to technical challenges. She had researched career options, enrolled in community college courses to provide plausible cover for her abilities, and built a reputation as someone who could fix anything mechanical or electronic. The work was satisfying in its way. She enjoyed the puzzle of diagnosis and the satisfaction of restoration, but it lacked the edge of urgency that had once defined her existence. In the military, every repair had mattered. Lives depended on properly functioning communication systems, radar arrays, and weapons platforms. There was clarity in that responsibility, a sense of purpose that civilian equipment repair couldn't match. Maya had never admitted this to her VA counselor, but she sometimes missed the weight of that responsibility, the way it had made every day feel significant. Her apartment felt too quiet now, filled with the kind of silence that invited uncomfortable thoughts. Maya walked to the kitchen and began preparing dinner with the same precision she brought to equipment repair. She had learned to cook during her transition to civilian life, finding comfort in the methodical process of following recipes and creating something nourishing from simple ingredients. Tonight's meal was bulgogi, her grandmother's recipe, modified for the ingredients available at the local Korean market. As she marinated thin slices of beef in a mixture of soy sauce, sesame oil, and pear juice, Maya let her mind wander through memories of family dinners in her childhood home, where her grandmother had told stories of surviving the Korean War and rebuilding her life in America. Adaptability, her grandmother had said in accented English mixed with Korean phrases Maya had never fully understood, is the most important skill. You learn to be what the situation requires. Maya had internalized that lesson, becoming a technician when the Navy needed her skills, becoming a civilian when her enlistment ended, becoming invisible when the weight of her memories became too much to bear. But adaptability required knowing what the situation actually required, and David's cryptic message had left her with more questions than answers. The beef sizzled as it hit the hot pan, filling the kitchen with familiar aromas that carried Maya back to Sunday dinners and family gatherings from before her military service had changed everything. She had been a different person then, someone who believed in clear distinctions between right and wrong, someone who trusted that doing good work and following orders would lead to outcomes she could be proud of. Military service had complicated those beliefs without destroying them entirely. Maya had seen the machinery of war up close, had maintained the systems that enabled both protection and destruction. She had learned that most situations existed in shades of gray, that the equipment she repaired could save American lives while ending others. that the moral weight of her actions was more complex than any training manual could address. But she had also learned the satisfaction of competence under pressure, the deep fulfillment that came from being genuinely needed, from possessing skills that made the difference between mission success and failure. That sense of purpose had sustained her through deployments and danger, had given meaning to long hours and difficult conditions. Civilian life offered different satisfactions. The pleasure of helping Rebecca keep her cafe running. The quiet pride of solving problems for people who appreciated her work. But Maya couldn't shake the feeling that she was operating below her true capacity. Like a Formula One car being used for grocery runs, her phone rang as she was setting the table for one. David's anonymous number displayed on the screen. Maya stared at it for 3 rings before answering. "I told you I'm not interested," she said without preamble. "I know," David replied, his voice carrying clearly through the connection. "But I also know you're curious. Phoenix always was." Maya moved to the window, peering through the blinds at the street below. "Stop calling me that. It's who you are," David said gently. "Changing your name doesn't change your nature." "My nature is fixing coffee machines and ice cream makers," Maya said. But the words felt hollow even as she spoke them. David was quiet for a moment, and Maya could hear background noise that suggested he was calling from a public place, probably somewhere with multiple exit routes and good sight lines. "Old habits. There's a situation," he said finally. "Equipment failure on a system that's critical to national security. Multiple technicians have tried to fix it, but it's beyond their capabilities. It's the kind of problem that requires someone who can think outside official procedures, someone who can make impossible repairs under pressure." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. "There are plenty of qualified technicians with current clearances and active duty status. You don't need a discharged sailor playing with coffee machines." "We need Phoenix," David said simply. Because Phoenix could always find solutions that others missed. Because Phoenix never gave up, never accepted that something couldn't be fixed. "Phoenix is dead," Maya said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Is she?" David asked. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like she's just been fixing different equipment. Same skills, same dedication, same refusal to let broken things stay broken." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the familiar tug of purpose that she had been trying to ignore for 6 months. David was right, of course. Her nature hadn't changed, only her environment. She was still someone who couldn't walk away from a broken system. Still someone who found meaning in restoration and repair. "What kind of equipment?" she heard herself asking. "The kind that keeps people safe," David replied. "The kind that prevents disasters instead of causing them." "I can't say more over an unsecured line, but if you're interested, there's a briefing tomorrow at 1400 hours. Maya knew she should hang up, should maintain her boundaries and protect the civilian life she had worked so hard to build. But curiosity was one of her defining characteristics, the trait that had made her an exceptional technician and was now making it impossible to ignore David's offer. "Where?" she asked. David gave her an address in Virginia Beach, a location Maya recognized as being near the Naval Special Warfare Compound, where she had occasionally worked during her active duty years. The familiarity of the area both comforted and worried her. It would be easy to navigate, but also full of memories and associations she had been trying to leave behind. "Maya," David said before she could hang up, his voice carrying a note of understanding that suggested he knew exactly what he was asking of her. "You don't have to decide tonight. Just come to the briefing. Listen to what we're dealing with. If you're not interested, you can walk away, and we'll never contact you again." "And if I am interested?" Maya asked. "Then Phoenix gets to do what she was born to do," David replied. "Fix the unfixable and save the day." After Maya ended the call, she sat at her table and ate her dinner in thoughtful silence. The bulgogi was perfectly seasoned, the rice cooked to optimal texture, but she barely tasted the food. Her mind was processing variables and possibilities, weighing the comfort of her current life against the pull of purpose she had been trying to ignore. Outside her apartment window, Virginia Beach settled into evening routines. Families gathered. For dinner, children played in yards while parents watched from porches. Couples walked dogs along sidewalks lit by street lamps that cast everything in warm, familiar light. It was the kind of normal, peaceful life that Maya had thought she wanted when she left the military. But as she cleared her dishes and prepared for another night of civilian sleep, Maya couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow's briefing was going to change everything. That the Virginia Beach Naval Special Warfare Facility looked exactly as Maya remembered: anonymous concrete buildings surrounded by fencing that managed to be both unremarkable and impenetrable. She had walked past the main gate twice before finally approaching the guard station, her civilian identity feeling increasingly fragile with each step toward her military past. The guard, a young sailor whose pressed uniform and alert posture marked him as someone still proving himself worthy of his assignment, examined Maya's driver's license with professional skepticism. Her name appeared on a visitor list that had materialized overnight, complete with security clearance verifications that Maya hadn't seen in 6 months. Building C, Conference Room 3, the guard said, returning her identification along with a temporary badge that felt heavier than its laminated construction warranted. Your escort will meet you at the front desk. Maya clipped the badge to her civilian blazer, a concession to professional appearance that felt like wearing a costume, and walked across the parking lot toward a building that housed some of her most challenging and rewarding memories. The weight of her decision to attend the briefing settled more heavily with each step, but curiosity had always been stronger than caution in Maya's personal equations. The escort turned out to be Lieutenant Sarah Kim, a communications officer, whose crisp efficiency and knowing smile suggested she was familiar with Maya's reputation even if they had never worked together directly. "Miss Chun," she said, extending a handshake that acknowledged both Maya's civilian status and her former military identity. "Thank you for coming." Conference Room 3 was a windowless space designed for classified discussions, with acoustic dampening and electronic countermeasures that created the peculiar silence of truly secure environments. A rectangular table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by chairs that had hosted countless briefings on operations that would never appear in public records. David was already seated at the far end of the table, but he wasn't alone. Maya recognized the other faces from her years working with special operations units, senior enlisted personnel and officers whose weathered features and careful postures spoke of extensive field experience. These were people who had seen combat, who understood the weight of decisions made in classified rooms and executed in hostile territories. "Maya," David said, rising as she entered, "thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet the team." The introductions were professionally minimal first. Names and general specializations that revealed nothing while implying everything. Chief Martinez, an explosive ordnance disposal specialist whose hands bore the small scars of working with devices designed to kill. Commander Thompson, whose silver dolphins and quiet authority marked her as a submarine officer with classified experience. Captain Rodriguez, no relation to Maya's deceased friend, but the name still caused a momentary emotional stumble, whose green beret and 1,000-yard stare identified him as someone who had spent years in places that didn't officially exist. Maya took the seat David indicated, noting how her position at the table suggested both inclusion and evaluation. She was here as a potential asset, someone whose skills were needed, but whose commitment remained uncertain. The familiar dynamics of military hierarchy and decision-making processes felt both comfortable and constraining after 6 months of civilian autonomy. "Before we begin," Commander Thompson said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from commanding nuclear submarines in hostile waters, I need to remind everyone that this briefing is classified at the top secret level with additional compartmented access restrictions. Ms. Chun, your previous clearance has been temporarily reactivated for the purpose of this discussion, but you are not obligated to accept any assignment that may be offered. Maya nodded her understanding, feeling the weight of security obligations she had almost forgotten. The military's classification system was more than just bureaucracy. It was a recognition that information itself could be weaponized, that knowledge shared carelessly could cost lives and compromise operations years in the future. The situation, David began, activating a wall-mounted display that showed a schematic Maya didn't immediately recognize, involves the failure of a critical communication system that provides secure coordination for multiple special operations teams currently deployed in high-risk environments. The schematic resolved into a complex array of satellite dishes, processing units, and relay stations that formed a communication network spanning 3 continents. Maya's trained eye immediately began identifying potential failure points and system vulnerabilities, but the overall architecture was more sophisticated than anything she had encountered during her active duty years. The system has been operational for 18 months. Chief Martinez explained, highlighting specific components as he spoke. It provides encrypted, real-time communication for teams operating in areas where conventional military communication is either unavailable or too easily compromised. Think of it as a private internet for special operations, completely separate from normal military channels. Maya leaned forward, studying the technical specifications that scrolled past the main display. The system was elegant in its complexity, designed with multiple redundancies and backup protocols that should have made total failure virtually impossible. But something had gone wrong, catastrophically wrong, judging by the red indicators that marked failed components throughout the network. What kind of failure are we looking at? Maya asked, falling naturally into the technical assessment role that had defined her. Military career. Commander Thompson touched a control that zoomed in on a central processing facility, located in what appeared to be a heavily fortified installation. The primary control node suffered a cascade failure that took down the entire network. Multiple backup systems failed to engage, and attempts to restore service using standard procedures have been unsuccessful. How unsuccessful? Maya pressed, recognizing the careful language that meant the situation was worse than anyone wanted to admit. Captain, Rodriguez answered with the blunt honesty of someone who had watched operations fail due to communication breakdowns. 3 teams have lost contact completely. 2 more are operating with severely degraded communication capabilities. We're coordinating complex operations using methods that haven't been reliable since Vietnam. The weight of the situation began to settle over Maya like a familiar burden. People were in danger, isolated in hostile environments without the communication lifelines that modern special operations required. Every hour of system downtime increased the risk of mission failure, capture, or death for operatives who had trusted their lives to technology that had failed them. Multiple technicians have attempted repairs, David continued, advancing to slides that showed diagnostic reports and repair attempts. All highly qualified, all with appropriate clearances and extensive experience with similar systems. But they're treating this as a standard hardware failure, following procedures that assumed the system was designed to be repairable using conventional methods. Maya studied the repair logs, noting the systematic approach each technician had taken. They were following proper procedures, working through established troubleshooting protocols, replacing components according to manufacturer specifications. It was exactly the kind of methodical, by-the-book approach that military technical training emphasized, and it was completely wrong for this situation. The system wasn't designed to fail gracefully, Maya said, the insight coming with the sudden clarity that had made her reputation. It was designed to fail catastrophically, to prevent Compromise if it was captured or penetrated by hostile forces. What you're seeing isn't a hardware failure, it's a security protocol that's been triggered. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the implications of Maya's assessment. A security protocol meant the system had detected what it interpreted as a hostile intrusion or compromise attempt, and had activated safeguards that prioritize data protection over operational functionality. Can you fix it? David asked directly. Maya was already mentally working through the challenges such a repair would involve. Security protocols were designed to be irreversible under normal circumstances, requiring specialized knowledge and tools that existed outside standard technical manuals. It would be like performing surgery on a patient who was actively trying to die, fighting against systems designed to prevent exactly the kind of intervention that was needed. Maybe, Maya said honestly. But it would require access to system documentation that probably doesn't officially exist, and tools that definitely aren't standard military issue. Plus, I'd need to work on site, with the actual hardware, probably under less than ideal conditions. Commander Thompson leaned back in her chair, studying Maya with the kind of assessment that submarine commanders use to evaluate personnel under pressure. The facility is located in hostile territory, she said bluntly. Not officially hostile, but not friendly either. Local government is unstable, infrastructure is unreliable, and there are multiple parties interested in either capturing or destroying the installation. How hostile? Maya asked, because the level of threat would determine what kind of support and security arrangements would be necessary. Captain Rodriguez answered with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The kind of hostile where we'll be going in covertly, staying only as long as absolutely necessary, and leaving before anyone notices we were there. Maya felt her pulse quicken with the familiar mix of anticipation and anxiety that accompanied high-risk operations. This wasn't a simple technical assignment, it was a combat mission disguised as a repair job, with all the dangers and uncertainties that such missions entailed. What about support? She asked, already knowing that the answer would determine her decision. How many people? What kind of equipment? How long do I have to make the repair? David consulted notes on a tablet that probably contained more classified information than most small countries possessed. Small team, minimal footprint. You, me, Chief Martinez for security and backup technical support, plus 2 additional personnel for communication and extraction coordination. Equipment package. Limited to what we can carry covertly. Time on target, no more than 72 hours. Maya's mind was already cataloging the specialized tools she would need. The diagnostic equipment required to trace through security protocols without triggering additional safeguards. 72 hours was optimistic for the kind of complex repair she was envisioning, but military operations rarely allowed for optimal conditions. The teams that are out of contact, Maya said, how long before their situations become critical? Commander Thompson consulted her own information sources before answering. Best case, they can maintain operational security for another week, using cached resources and backup communication methods. Worst case, they're already in immediate danger, and we just don't know about it. The room fell quiet as everyone processed the stakes involved. Maya had worked on critical systems before, but never with such direct and immediate consequences. The teams depending on restored communication weren't statistics or mission parameters, they were people whose lives depended on her ability to resurrect a system that had been designed to resist resurrection. There's something else, David. Saad, his tone suggesting additional complications that hadn't yet been revealed. Intelligence indicates that hostile forces are aware of the communication system's existence and are actively trying to capture both the facility and any technical personnel who might be sent to repair it. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the conference room's air conditioning. They know someone's coming to fix it? They know someone has to come fix it, Chief Martinez clarified. The system is too valuable to abandon, and the operational consequences of permanent failure are too severe. They're counting on us sending a repair team, and they're prepared to intercept us. Maya absorbed this information with the kind of analytical detachment that military training had ingrained in her thinking processes. The mission parameters were becoming clearer, but so were the risks. This wasn't just a technical challenge, it was a race against time with hostile forces actively working to prevent success. What kind of preparation are we talking about? She asked. Captain Rodriguez activated another display that showed satellite imagery of the target facility and surrounding terrain. Electronic surveillance, roadblocks on major access routes, increased patrols in the area. They're treating this like a high-value target interdiction operation. Maya studied the imagery, noting the defensive positions and patrol patterns that suggested a sophisticated understanding of American special operations tactics. These weren't opportunistic insurgents or casual criminals. They were organized, well-equipped forces with professional military training and intelligence support. How do we get in? She asked, because the technical aspects of the repair would be meaningless if they couldn't reach the facility alive. David smiled with the kind of confidence that came from years of successful infiltration operations. Very carefully we go. In small, fast, and unexpected. Think of it as a technical house call with significant security considerations. The euphemistic language couldn't disguise the reality of what David was describing. This would be a covert insertion into hostile territory with limited support and no official backup if things went wrong. Maya had participated in similar operations during her military service, but always as technical support for teams whose primary mission was combat, not repair. I need to think about this, Maya said, though she could feel her decision crystallizing even as she spoke the words. The combination of technical challenge, operational necessity, and professional pride was creating an irresistible pull toward acceptance. Commander Thompson nodded with understanding. Take whatever time you need, but understand that every hour of delay increases the risk to the teams we're trying to support. They're depending on us to restore their lifeline home. Maya looked around the conference room, seeing faces that reflected her own understanding of military necessity and personal responsibility. These people were asking her to risk her life for strangers she would never meet, to venture into danger, for the abstract concept of mission success. But they were also offering her the chance to use her skills for their highest purpose, to be Phoenix again in a situation where resurrection truly mattered. If I agree, Maya said slowly, I have conditions. David leaned forward, his expression suggesting he had expected this negotiation. What kind of conditions? First, I choose my own tools and equipment. No substitutions, no compromises based on weight or space considerations. If I'm going to fix this system, I need the right instruments. Agreed, David said without hesitation. Second, I want complete technical briefings on the system architecture, including classified documentation that other repair teams haven't seen. If there are design specifications or maintenance protocols that aren't in the standard manuals, I need access to them. Commander Thompson consulted something on her tablet before nodding. We can arrange appropriate clearance upgrades and documentation. Access. Third, Maya continued, if the situation becomes untenable, if the security situation deteriorates beyond acceptable parameters, we extract immediately. I won't sacrifice the team for the mission. Captain Rodriguez's expression suggested he understood the wisdom of this condition, even if it complicated operational planning. Combat operations always involve risk assessment and adjustment. We'll maintain situational awareness and make decisions based on current conditions. Maya took a deep breath, feeling the weight of decision settling over her like familiar equipment. She was about to step back into a world she had tried to leave behind, to reclaim an identity she had thought was buried forever. But the alternative allowing Critical systems to remain broken while people died in hostile territory was unacceptable to someone whose nature demanded that broken things be fixed. "I'm in," she said simply. The room erupted in controlled activity as team members began coordinating the complex logistics of a covert operation. David immediately activated secure communication systems to begin arranging transportation and equipment acquisition. Chief Martinez pulled up tactical maps and began planning insertion routes and contingency extraction plans. Commander Thompson started the process of upgrading Maya's security clearances and arranging access to classified technical documentation. Maya sat quietly in the midst of the organized chaos, feeling the familiar sensation of being swept up in military efficiency and purpose. Part of her was terrified by what she had agreed to undertake, but a larger part was energized by the prospect of meaningful work under challenging conditions. "Maya," David said, appearing at her elbow with a tablet containing preliminary mission timelines. "We're looking at a 48-hour preparation window. Think that's enough time to get ready?" Maya considered the complexity of the repair she was contemplating, the specialized tools she would need to acquire or fabricate, and the psychological preparation required to transition from civilian life to combat operations. "It'll have to be," she said, because that was the kind of answer Phoenix would have given Dot as the briefing concluded and team members dispersed to begin their individual preparation tasks. Maya found herself walking across the parking lot with mixed emotions churning in her chest. The afternoon sun felt different somehow, as if her decision to rejoin the classified world had changed the very quality of light and air around her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Hope your appointment went well. See you tomorrow morning." Maya stared at the message, realizing that she would have to find a way to explain her sudden absence without revealing the nature of her assignment. Rebecca had become more than an employer over the past 6 months. She was a friend, someone who represented the civilian life Maya was about to abandon, possibly permanently. She typed back, "Family emergency. Might be gone for a week or so. Will call when I can." It was a lie, but a necessary one that protected both Rebecca and the operational security of the mission. Maya had learned during her military service that the people you cared about were often safer when they knew nothing about the dangers you faced in their name. The drive back to her apartment felt like a journey between worlds, each mile marking her transition from Maya, the equipment repair woman, to Phoenix, the special operations technician. By the time she reached her parking space, she was already mentally cataloging the tools and equipment she would need for a mission that would either restore her sense of purpose or destroy the civilian life she had worked so hard to build. Inside her apartment, Maya moved with the efficiency of someone preparing for deployment. She pulled her tool case from the closet and began the methodical process of checking each instrument, testing calibration, and replacing worn components with precision. Tools she kept in reserve. These weren't the tools of a coffee machine repair technician. They were the instruments of someone who worked on systems worth millions of dollars in environments where failure meant death. As evening settled over Virginia Beach, Maya sat at her kitchen table and began writing letters she hoped would never need to be delivered. One to Rebecca, explaining her sudden departure and expressing gratitude for friendship and employment that had helped heal wounds left by military service. One to her grandmother, written in the mixture of English and Korean that had defined their family conversations, acknowledging the strength and adaptability that had shaped Maya's character. And one to Tommy Rodriguez, her deceased friend whose memory had haunted her civilian life, promising that she would honor his sacrifice by using her skills to protect others. The letters joined other documents in a manila envelope that Maya labeled with instructions for disposal in case she didn't return from the mission. It was a morbid ritual, but one that brought clarity and focus to her mental preparation. Phoenix had always been someone who planned for contingencies. who prepared for failure while working toward success. Her phone rang as she was sealing the envelope, David's number appearing on the screen. "Just checking in," he said without preamble. "How are you feeling about tomorrow?" "Ready," Maya said, surprised by how true the statement felt. "What's the final timeline?" "Wheels up at 0600 from Norfolk. Flight time approximately 14 hours with refueling stops. We'll arrive in country after local sunset, establish our forward operating base, and begin approach to the target facility at first light." Maya made notes on a pad beside her phone, automatically translating military time notation and calculating time zones. The mission schedule was aggressive but achievable, assuming no unexpected complications or delays. "Equipment list?" she asked. "Being finalized now. Your tool requirements have been approved, along with specialized diagnostic equipment that should give you everything you need for system analysis and repair. We're also including backup components based on your assessment of likely failure points." Maya nodded, though David couldn't see the gesture through the phone connection. "What about the hostile force situation?" "Intelligence indicates they're maintaining surveillance of the facility, but haven't attempted direct assault. Our assessment is that they're waiting for a repair team to arrive before making their move. That gives us a narrow window of opportunity. If we can get in and out before they realize what's happening." "And if they realize what's happening while we're still there?" Maya asked. David's pause was answer enough. "Then we improvise," he said finally. "But the teams depending on restored communication don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect conditions." After ending the call, Maya walked through her apartment one final time, seeing familiar objects and spaces with the clarity that came from potential finality. The IKEA furniture that had seemed so important when she was building her civilian identity now appeared temporary, borrowed from a life that had always been provisional. The books and decorations that had been meant to anchor her in normal existence felt like stage props in a performance that was ending. But the technical manuals, the reference books filled with margin notes and bookmarked sections, the notebook, where she recorded innovative solutions to complex problems, these felt permanent, essential, true to her nature in ways that civilian normalcy never had. Maya packed a small bag with civilian clothes that would provide cover for her journey. But her real preparation involved mental and emotional processes that had nothing to do with material possessions. She was transforming herself back into Phoenix, reclaiming an identity that had defined her most meaningful work and significant relationships. As she settled into bed for what might be her last night in the apartment that had sheltered her transition to civilian life, Maya felt a combination of anticipation and resignation that reminded her of pre-deployment emotions from her military service. Tomorrow would begin a mission that could restore communication for isolated special operations teams, but it would also mark the end of her attempt to build a life separate from the classified world of national security and military operations. Phoenix was rising from the ashes of Maya's civilian existence, and there might be no returning to the quiet life of coffee machine repairs and anonymous competence. But as Maya closed her eyes and began the mental preparation for combat operations, she realized that she was ready for that transformation, ready to be who she truly was rather than who she had tried to become. The transport aircraft's engines created a monotonous drone that Maya found oddly comforting as she made final adjustments to her equipment configuration. 14 hours of flight time had given her ample opportunity to review technical documentation and familiarize herself with the communication system's architecture. But the real education had come from conversations with her team members about the operational context surrounding their mission. Chief Martinez had spent most of the flight briefing Maya on the security situation surrounding the target facility, using satellite imagery and intelligence reports to paint a picture of organized opposition that was more sophisticated than initial assessments had suggested. The hostile forces weren't just monitoring the facility, they were conducting their own technical reconnaissance, trying to understand the communication system well enough to either capture it intact or ensure its complete destruction. They have their own technical team, Martinez had explained, pointing to surveillance photos that showed individuals with specialized equipment near the facility perimeter. Signal intelligence suggests they're running sophisticated electronic warfare packages, probably trying to penetrate the system's security protocols from outside. Maya had studied the photos with growing concern, recognizing equipment that was far beyond the capabilities of typical insurgent or criminal organizations. The electronic warfare systems visible in the imagery were military-grade, suggesting state-level support for the operation against the communication facility. Who are we really dealing with? She had asked David during a brief moment when they could speak privately in the aircraft's cargo compartment. David's expression had carried the weight of classified knowledge that he couldn't fully share. Let's just say that certain nations have a strong interest in disrupting American special operations capabilities, and they're willing to invest significant resources in achieving that goal. Now, as the aircraft began its descent toward a landing strip that didn't appear on any civilian aviation charts, Maya felt the familiar pre-mission tension that combined anticipation with carefully controlled anxiety. The next few hours would determine whether her skills were sufficient to restore critical communication capabilities, and whether her team could accomplish their objectives while avoiding the hostile forces that were almost certainly waiting. For them, the landing was smooth despite the rough condition of the airstrip, a testament to the pilot's skill and the aircraft's robust construction. As Maya gathered her equipment and prepared to disembark, she caught sight of the local terrain through the aircraft's small windows. Arid hills dotted with sparse vegetation, terrain that would provide excellent observation positions for anyone monitoring the area. The forward operating base turned out to be a collection of prefabricated structures, hidden in a ravine approximately 20 kilometers from the target facility. The location had been chosen for concealment rather than comfort, with camouflage netting and electronic countermeasures designed to minimize the base's signature to aerial and electronic surveillance. Maya was introduced to the two additional team members who had preceded their arrival: Lieutenant Collins, a communication specialist whose expertise complemented Maya's technical skills, and Sergeant Williams, whose job was to coordinate extraction and provide security overwatch during the actual repair operation. Intelligence update, Collins began, immediately after introductions were completed, activating a display that showed real-time surveillance data from the target area. Hostile forces have increased their activity level significantly in the past 12 hours. We're seeing more frequent patrols, additional electronic reconnaissance, and what appears to be preparation for a major operation. Maya studied the surveillance data, noting patterns that suggested the hostile forces were positioning themselves for an assault on the facility, rather than simply maintaining observation. They're not planning to wait for us, she realized. They're going to try to take the facility by force. David nodded grimly. Our intelligence analysts reached the same conclusion. Best estimate is that we have a narrow window, maybe 18 to 24 hours, before they launch their assault. Can we get in and out in that time frame? Maya asked, though she was already calculating the repair timeline based on her analysis of the system documentation. Captain Rodriguez consulted tactical planning materials, spread across a folding table. Insertion after midnight local time. Approach the facility using concealed routes that avoid known patrol patterns. Conduct the repair operation during daylight hours when we can see what we're doing. Extract before the next evening when hostile activity typically increases. Maya reviewed her technical assessment one more time, considering the complexity of the repair against the time constraints they were facing. The security protocol shutdown is going to require careful analysis before I can even attempt to bypass. If the system detects unauthorized access attempts, it could trigger additional safeguards that would make the repair impossible. "Let's go fix the unfixable," she whispered, echoing David's description of her mission while feeling the familiar surge of purpose that had always accompanied her most challenging technical assignments. Phoenix was fully awakened now, ready to attempt resurrection of a system that others had declared dead, ready to justify the faith that her team was placing in her unique capabilities. The next 14 hours would determine whether she could live up to the legend of her call sign, whether the technical skills that had defined her military identity were sufficient for a mission where failure meant death for people. She would never meet. As the team began their final approach to the target facility, Maya felt the weight of specialized tools in her pack and the deeper weight of responsibility that came with being someone else's last hope for technical salvation. Phoenix had risen from the ashes of Maya's civilian life, and now it was time to discover whether her legendary abilities were sufficient for the ultimate test of resurrection under fire. The service entrance to the communication facility opened with surprising ease, revealing that the cascade system failure had indeed disabled most of the installation's security measures. Maya followed Chief Martinez through corridors that hummed with the residual power of backup systems, emergency lighting casting everything in red-tinted shadows that made the facility feel like the interior of a wounded machine. "Technical Bay is 2 levels down," Lieutenant Collins whispered, consulting building schematics on a ruggedized tablet. "Main server room and primary communication arrays are in the sub-basement, behind additional security doors that should still be functional." Maya nodded, her mind already shifting into the focused state that complex repairs required. The facility's architecture was familiar from her military experience, hardened spaces designed to continue operating under adverse conditions, with redundant systems and multiple failure points that should have prevented the kind of cascade collapse they were dealing with. But as they descended through stairwells lit only by emergency power, Maya began to see evidence of why standard repair attempts had failed. The security shutdown hadn't been triggered by external attack or system compromise, it had been triggered by the repair attempts themselves. Each time a technician had tried to restart failed components, the system had interpreted the intervention as a potential security breach, activating additional protective measures that made the problem progressively worse. "Jesus," Maya breathed, as they reached the technical bay and she got her first look at the primary communication array. The status displays showed a pattern of failures that resembled nothing so much as an immune system response, with security protocols systematically isolating and protecting critical components from what they perceived as hostile intrusion. Chief Martinez took position at the entry to provide security while Maya and Lieutenant Collins approached the main diagnostic console. The array of screens and indicators told a story of progressive system shutdown that had occurred over several weeks, each failed restart attempt triggering additional defensive measures until the entire network had essentially placed itself in protective hibernation. "Can you wake it up?" Collins asked, though her voice suggested she already understood the complexity of what Maya was facing. "Maybe," Maya replied, connecting her specialized diagnostic equipment to access ports that previous technicians had probably overlooked. "But not by forcing it. This system is like a trauma patient that's gone into shock. We need to convince it that it's safe to come back online, not try to shock it back to consciousness." Maya's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she began tracing the cascade failure back to its original trigger point. The diagnostic equipment she had brought revealed system architecture that was more sophisticated than the documentation had indicated, with adaptive security protocols that had learned from each repair attempt and evolved more effective countermeasures. "There," she said after 20 minutes of careful analysis, pointing to a subsystem that appeared normal on standard diagnostics but showed anomalous behavior patterns on her specialized equipment. Someone tried to install unauthorized monitoring software about 3 weeks ago. The system detected the intrusion attempt and activated defensive protocols that were designed to prevent exactly that kind of compromise. Lieutenant Collins leaned over Maya's shoulder, studying the diagnostic displays. So the system isn't actually broken, it's protecting itself from perceived attack? Exactly. And every time someone has tried to restart it using standard procedures, the system has interpreted those attempts as continuation of the original attack. It's been getting more defensive with each intervention. Maya began the delicate process of convincing the system that it was safe to begin restoration procedures. This required accessing diagnostic modes that existed outside normal operational parameters, communicating with the system's security protocols, using authentication codes that she had memorized during her years working with classified communication. Arrays, the work required total concentration, but Maya remained peripherally aware of time pressure and the security situation developing around the facility. Through her earpiece, she could hear periodic reports from Sergeant Williams, who was monitoring hostile force movements from his overwatch position. Patrol patterns are shifting, Williams reported. Looks like they're moving up their timeline. I'm seeing staging activity that suggests assault preparation. David's voice came through the team communication channel with controlled urgency. How much time do you need, Maya? Maya paused in her diagnostic sequence to assess her progress. She had successfully identified the trigger mechanisms that had initiated the cascade failure, but convincing the system to abandon its defensive posture would require patient, methodical work that couldn't be rushed without triggering additional protective measures. 6 hours minimum, she replied honestly. Maybe 8, depending on what I find when I get deeper into the security architecture. We might not have 8 hours. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried the tension of someone monitoring multiple threat indicators simultaneously. Maya understood the time pressure, but she also understood that hasty technical work would guarantee failure. I can't force this, she said. The system has to trust that it's safe to come back online, and that trust has to be earned through careful, patient work. Do what you can, David replied. We'll buy you whatever time we can manage. Maya returned her attention to the diagnostic displays, diving deeper into the system's security protocols and beginning the careful process of authentication and trust building that would eventually allow her to initiate restoration procedures. The work was like performing surgery on a patient who is conscious but terrified, requiring gentle persuasion rather than forceful intervention. As she worked, Maya became aware that Lieutenant Collins was conducting her own analysis of the system, focusing on the communication protocols and network architecture rather than the security systems that were Maya's primary concern. Maya, Collins said after an hour of quiet analysis, I think I found something that might change our approach. Maya looked up from her diagnostic work to see Collins pointing at a display that showed network traffic patterns from before the cascade failure. What am I looking at? Communication logs from the 3 weeks before the system shut down, Collins explained. Look at the pattern of traffic volume and routing. Maya studied the data, noting irregularities that suggested the monitoring software installation attempt had been more sophisticated than her initial analysis had revealed. Someone wasn't just trying to monitor communications, she realized. They were trying to map the entire network architecture, identify all the connected systems and operational dependencies. Which means, Collins continued, that the hostile forces planning to assault this facility probably know exactly what they're trying to capture. This isn't a random attack, it's a targeted operation to seize a specific communication capability. The implications of this revelation settled over Maya like a cold weight. The system she was trying to repair wasn't just supporting current special operations teams. It was a strategic asset whose compromise could affect American military capabilities for years to come. We need to consider the possibility, Collins said quietly, that successful repair might not be the best outcome if the facility is going to be overrun. Maya's hands paused over her diagnostic equipment as she processed this dilemma. Her mission was to restore the communication system, But if that system was immediately captured by hostile forces, her success could become a strategic disaster. "What are you suggesting?" Maya asked. Collins consulted her analysis of the system architecture. "The security protocols that are currently protecting the system, what if we modified them instead of bypassing them? What if we restored partial functionality that would allow communication with current teams while ensuring that full capabilities could never be compromised?" Maya considered this approach, recognizing the elegance of using the system's defensive measures as permanent protection rather than temporary obstacles. It would require a completely different repair strategy, one that worked with the security protocols rather than against them. "That's brilliant," Maya said, "but it would take even longer to implement. I'd essentially be redesigning the system architecture while performing the repair." "How much longer?" David's voice came through the communication channel, suggesting. He had been monitoring their technical discussion. Maya began calculating the additional complexity that Collins's approach would require. 12 to 14 hours, minimum. But the result would be a system that could support current operations while being essentially immune to hostile capture or compromise. The communication channel was quiet for several minutes as the team leadership considered this option against the deteriorating security situation around the facility. "Williams reports hostile forces are definitely accelerating their timeline," Captain Rodriguez finally said. "We're probably looking at assault initiation within the next 6 to 8 hours. Maya felt the weight of decision pressing down on her like a physical force. She could attempt a quick restoration that might work, but would leave the system vulnerable to capture. Or she could implement Collins's more sophisticated approach that would take longer but provide permanent protection. "There's a third option," Maya said slowly, as a new possibility occurred to her. "What if we restore the system with a hidden shutdown protocol? Give it the capability to function normally until a specific trigger is activated, then have it permanently destroy itself rather than allow compromise." Collins's eyes lit up with understanding. "A dead man switch. The system works normally unless it detects capture or unauthorized access, then it commits electronic suicide." "Exactly. We restore full functionality for current operations. Build in permanent protection against hostile seizure." David's voice carried new interest. "How long for that approach?" Maya was already mentally working through the technical requirements. 4 hours for basic restoration, another 2 hours to implement the protection protocol. Total of 6 hours, which might be achievable if the hostile timeline slips even slightly. "Do it," David decided. "Restore the system with the protection protocol. Williams, give me updated assessment of hostile force timeline." Maya immediately began reconfiguring her repair approach, working with Collins to design a restoration sequence that would return the Phase 1 communication system to full operational status while building in safeguards that would prevent it from ever being used against American interests. The work was among the most complex Maya had ever attempted, requiring her to simultaneously understand the system's current defensive posture, design a path back to normal operations, and implement new security measures that would be invisible to casual inspection, but absolutely effective against hostile compromised data as she worked. Maya could hear periodic updates from the security team monitoring the situation around the facility. Hostile forces were definitely moving up their assault timeline, but they appeared to be waiting for full darkness before initiating their attack. This gave Maya's team a narrow window of opportunity, but one that was rapidly closing. 2 hours. To restoration, Maya reported after working steadily through what her watch indicated was mid-afternoon. Protection protocol implementation will take another 90 minutes after that. "Copy," David replied. "Keep working. We'll handle security considerations." Maya lost herself in the intricate technical work, her hands moving with the precision of someone performing surgery while her mind calculated the complex relationships between system components, security protocols, and the new protection measures she was implementing. The restoration process required her to essentially teach the system to trust itself again, convincing defensive protocols to stand down while maintaining readiness to activate the permanent protection measures she was installing. It was like performing therapy on a traumatized machine, helping it distinguish between real threats and perceived dangers. System restoration complete, Maya announced as communication arrays throughout the facility began returning to operational status, testing connectivity with supported teams now. Lieutenant Collins worked at her communication console, establishing contact with the special operations teams that had been isolated by the system failure. Contact established with Team Alpha, she reported. They're operational but in defensive posture due to communication blackout. Team Bravo is requesting immediate extraction due to compromised position. Team Charlie reports mission success and is en route to extraction point. Maya felt the satisfaction of successful technical work as the communication system began handling traffic that had been backlogged for weeks. The teams depending on this capability were alive and operational, and her repair work had restored their lifeline to support and coordination. Protection protocol implementation complete, Maya announced 30 minutes ahead of her estimated timeline. System is fully operational with permanent safeguards against hostile compromise. Outstanding work. David's voice carried relief and professional admiration. Initiate extraction sequence. Williams reports hostile assault will begin within the next 2 hours. Maya began securing her equipment with the efficiency of someone who had performed this ritual many times under similar pressure. Her specialized tools went back into their protective cases. Diagnostic equipment was disconnected and stowed, and all evidence of her technical intervention was carefully removed. But as she prepared to leave the technical bay, Maya realized that something fundamental had changed during the hours she had spent working on the communication system. She was no longer Maya, the civilian repair technician, trying to reclaim her military identity. She was Phoenix, the technical specialist whose unique capabilities had just saved lives and protected critical national security assets. The transformation felt permanent, not just for the duration of this mission, but for whatever came afterward. Phoenix had been awakened by necessity and proven herself under conditions that confirmed her value and purpose. There would be no returning to the quiet anonymity of civilian life, no pretending that coffee machine repairs could provide the same satisfaction as work that truly mattered. As the team began their extraction movement through the facilities corridors, Maya felt a deep sense of completion that had nothing to do with successful mission execution. She had discovered who she truly was, what she was meant to do, and where she belonged in the world. Phoenix had risen from the ashes of Maya's attempted civilian life, and this time the resurrection was permanent. 6 months later, Maya Chun stood in a classified facility 30 miles outside Quantico, her hands working with practiced precision on a communication array that represented the cutting edge of military technology. The system she was calibrating would provide secure coordination for special operations teams across 4 different theaters, incorporating lessons learned from the mission that had brought Phoenix back to life. The contractor badge clipped to her shirt identified her as a civilian technical consultant. But everyone who worked with her knew the truth. Phoenix had returned to the world where her skills mattered most, where broken systems meant broken lives, and where her unique abilities could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. "How's it looking, Phoenix?" asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the program manager who had recruited Maya for the Next Generation Communication Project. Sarah had been Lieutenant Kim during the briefing that changed Maya's life, but she had since transitioned to civilian service with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, where former military personnel brought operational experience to cutting-edge development projects. "Better than expected," Maya replied, reviewing diagnostic readouts that showed system performance exceeding design specifications. The adaptive security protocols are learning faster than we modeled, and the redundancy systems are more robust than anything I worked with during active duty. Maya's transition back to government service had been smoother than she had expected, facilitated by people who understood the value of her unique combination of technical expertise and operational experience. The salary was better than anything she could have earned in civilian life, and the work provided the sense of purpose that coffee machine repairs had never been able to match. But more importantly, she was part of a community again, working alongside people who shared her commitment to excellence under pressure and her understanding that technical work in the classified world carried moral weight that extended far beyond individual job satisfaction. Any word from the field? Test? Maya asked, referring to the first deployment of the new communication system with an actual special operations team. Sarah consulted a secure tablet that showed real-time status reports from multiple classified operations. Team deployed 18 hours ago for a high-priority mission in hostile territory. Communication quality is outstanding, security protocols are functioning flawlessly, and they've already credited the system with enabling coordination that wouldn't have been possible with previous generation equipment. Maya felt the familiar satisfaction of successful technical work, but magnified by the knowledge that her engineering had directly contributed to the safety and effectiveness of people operating in dangerous environments. This was the feeling she had been searching for during her months of civilian life, the deep fulfillment that came from work that truly mattered. Her phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca at Coastline Cafe. "Hope your new job is going well. Coffee machine still running perfectly thanks to your magic touch. Stop by anytime for a free latte." Maya smiled at the message, remembering the life she had briefly tried to build in the anonymous comfort of civilian service. Rebecca had accepted her explanation about taking a government position that required security clearances and occasional travel, and they had maintained a friendship based on Maya's periodic visits to the cafe during her rare free weekends. That life felt distant now, like a costume she had worn while trying to become someone she wasn't meant to be. Phoenix belonged in facilities like this one, working on systems that protected American interests and American lives, using skills that had been honed through years of military service and refined through the kind of challenging missions that pushed technical capabilities to their absolute limits. "Maya," David's voice called from across the technical bay, and she looked up to see him approaching, with a folder marked with classification stamps that indicated highly sensitive information. David had also transitioned to civilian contractor status, but he spent most of his time coordinating between special operations commands and the technical teams that supported their missions. "New project?" Maya asked, recognizing the expression David wore when he was about to present a challenge that would test her abilities. "Potential new project," David corrected, handing her the folder. "Remember the communication system you repaired 6 months ago? The one with the protection protocols you designed?" Maya nodded, remembering the system that had brought Phoenix back to life and proven that her unique combination of technical skills and operational understanding could solve problems that defeated conventional approaches. "Those protection protocols you implemented have become the gold standard for secure communication architecture," David continued. "Every new system we deploy incorporates variations of your design, and we've had zero compromises or security breaches since implementation." Maya opened the folder and began reading technical specifications for a communication network that would span multiple continents and support coordination between American Special Operations Forces and allied military units. The scope was enormous, the technical challenges unprecedented, and the operational significance potentially transformative for international military cooperation. "This would be a 2-year project," David explained, "with deployment in some of the most sensitive theaters where American forces operate. You'd be the lead technical architect, responsible for designing security protocols that can protect allied communication while maintaining operational effectiveness under combat conditions. Maya studied the technical requirements, her mind automatically beginning to process the engineering challenges and innovative solutions that such a system would require. It was exactly the kind of complex, high-stakes project that Phoenix had been born to tackle, work that would push the boundaries of what was technically possible while serving purposes that extended far beyond individual career advancement. "When do we start?" Maya asked, though her decision had been made the moment she opened the folder. 2 years later, the awards ceremony at the Pentagon was smaller than Maya had expected, held in a classified conference room where the assembled audience consisted entirely of people with appropriate security clearances and operational need-to-know. But the significance of the moment was unmistakable as she stood beside the communication system that had become the backbone of international special operations coordination. The Phoenix Network, as it had come to be known within the classified community, now supported secure communication for American, British, Canadian, and Australian special operations forces operating in 12 different countries. The adaptive security protocols Maya had designed ensured that mission-critical information could be shared between allied forces while maintaining protection against even the most sophisticated attempts at compromise or penetration. "Chief Warrant Officer Chun," the admiral conducting the ceremony said, using the rank Maya had been granted as a civilian contractor with military authority. "Your technical innovations have fundamentally changed how our special operations forces coordinate with allied units, enabling mission success that would have been impossible using previous generation communication systems." Maya accepted the classified decoration that acknowledged her contribution to national security, knowing that the award itself would remain locked in a vault and that her role in the Phoenix Network's development would never be publicly recognized. But the knowledge that her work had saved lives and enhanced American military capabilities provided satisfaction that no public recognition could match. After the ceremony, Maya found herself in the Pentagon's cafeteria with David and several other team members who had contributed to the Phoenix Network's success. The conversation was carefully constrained by security considerations, but the shared understanding of what they had accomplished together created a sense of camaraderie that reminded Maya of her best military experiences. "So what's next?" asked Major Lisa Rodriguez, a former Army intelligence officer who had managed the international coordination aspects of the Phoenix Network deployment. "Any new challenges on the horizon that require Phoenix's unique touch?" David smiled with the expression that Maya had learned to associate with projects that would push her technical abilities in new directions. "Actually, there's been some interest from NASA about communication systems for deep space missions. Apparently they have some challenges with maintaining secure contact with spacecraft operating beyond conventional satellite coverage." Maya's eyes lit up with interest as she considered the technical implications of space-based communication systems. Different environment, different challenges, she mused, but the fundamental principles would be similar. Reliable communication under extreme conditions, security protocols that function independently of Earth-based support, redundancy systems that can handle equipment failures millions of miles from any repair capability. "Think you're interested?" David asked. "Are you kidding?" Maya replied, "Space-based communication systems? That's like the ultimate technical challenge." As the conversation continued, Maya reflected on the journey that had brought her from civilian life to her current position as one of the government's most valued technical consultants. The transformation from Maya, the coffee machine repairwoman, to Phoenix, the cutting-edge communication systems architect, had been more complete than she could have imagined when David first approached her at Coastline Cafe. 5 years later, Maya stood in mission control at Johnson Space Center, monitoring communication systems that connected Earth with the International Space Station, lunar research facilities, and a deep space probe approaching Mars. The Phoenix Deep Space Communication Network had exceeded all performance expectations, maintaining secure contact with spacecraft operating under conditions that would have made previous generation systems completely ineffective. Phoenix Network is showing green across all channels, reported the communication officer, a young Air Force lieutenant, whose technical training included courses that Maya had developed based on her years of experience with adaptive security protocols. Maya nodded, but her attention was focused on anomalous readings from the Mars probe that suggested potential equipment degradation after 18 months of interplanetary travel. The diagnostic data indicated problems that were beyond the capability of the probe's automated repair systems, but Maya was already formulating solutions that could be implemented using the probe's existing hardware and the spare components it carried for exactly this kind of emergency. "Looks like we have a technical challenge," she announced to the mission control team, feeling the familiar surge of anticipation that accompanied complex problems requiring innovative solutions. "Can you fix it from here?" asked Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the mission director whose confidence in Maya's abilities had been earned through years of successful problem-solving under impossible conditions. Maya was already pulling up detailed schematics of the probe's communication systems, her mind beginning the analytical process that had made her legendary within the aerospace community. "Give me 4 hours," she said with the quiet confidence that had become her trademark. "I'll need to design new diagnostic protocols and upload them to the probe, then guide the automated systems through repairs that weren't in the original mission planning." As Maya began the intricate work of diagnosing and repairing spacecraft systems across millions of miles of empty space, she reflected on how far her journey had taken her from the small cafe where David had first recognized Phoenix's unique capabilities. The technical challenges had evolved, the environments had become more extreme, but the fundamental satisfaction remained the same: using her skills to fix what others couldn't repair, to maintain critical systems that enabled missions that mattered. 10 years later, Maya's office at the newly established Space Force Technical Innovation Center was cluttered with awards, technical manuals, and photographs from missions that had pushed the boundaries of what was technically possible. As the director of the Advanced Communication Systems Division, she oversaw teams of engineers and technicians who were developing communication capabilities for military operations that extended beyond Earth's atmosphere. But despite her administrative responsibilities, Maya still insisted on hands-on involvement in the most challenging technical problems. And today she was working on diagnostic protocols for a communication satellite that had gone silent while orbiting Jupiter's moon Europa. "Dr. Chun," her assistant announced over the office intercom, "there's a young technician here who says she has ideas about the Europa communication problem." Maya looked up from the satellite schematics she had been studying, intrigued by the possibility that someone else might have insights into the complex challenge she was facing. "Send her in." The technician who entered Maya's office was surprisingly young, probably in her mid-20s, with the kind of intense focus that Maya recognized in people who lived for technical challenges. She carried a folder of hand-drawn diagrams and calculations that suggested she had been working on the Europa problem using her own time and resources. "Dr. Chun," the young woman said, her voice carrying nervous excitement, "I'm Petty Officer Sarah Martinez. I've been studying the Europa satellite failure, and I think I've found a way to restore communication using systems that are still functional." Maya gestured for Martinez to sit down, remembering her own early career, when senior technicians had been willing to listen to unconventional ideas from junior personnel. "Show me what you've got." Martinez spread her diagrams across Maya's desk, revealing a sophisticated analysis of the satellite's redundant systems and a creative approach to rerouting communication through backup hardware that other technicians had dismissed as non-functional. "The primary communication array failed," Martinez explained, but the navigation sensors are still operational. If we can reprogram the navigation system to function as a communication relay, we might be able to establish contact using protocols that bypass the damaged components. Maya studied the proposed solution, recognizing the kind of innovative thinking that had characterized her own approach to impossible problems throughout her career. Martinez's idea was unconventional, technically challenging, and potentially brilliant, exactly the kind of solution that Phoenix would have developed. "How long have you been working on this?" Maya asked. 3 weeks, Martinez admitted. "I know it's not my assigned project, but the problem was so interesting that I couldn't stop thinking about solutions." Maya smiled, remembering her own compulsion to solve technical puzzles regardless of whether they fell within her official responsibilities. "What's your background, Petty Officer Martinez?" "Electronic technician, ma'am. 5 years of experience with communication systems, mostly conventional military applications. But I've always been interested in adaptive solutions for extreme environments." Maya made a decision that would have significant implications for both their careers. "How would you like to join my team permanently? We need people who can think beyond conventional approaches, who can find solutions that others miss." Martinez's face lit up with the kind of excitement that Maya remembered from her own early encounters with mentors who had recognized her potential. "I'd be honored, ma'am." "Call me Phoenix," Maya said, using the call sign that had followed her through transitions between military service, civilian life, and back to government work. "And let's see if we can bring that satellite back to life." As Maya and Martinez began working together on the Europa communication problem, Maya reflected on the strange circularity of her career. She had begun as a young technician whose unconventional solutions had earned recognition from senior personnel who understood the value of innovative thinking. Now she was the senior technician, identifying and nurturing the next generation of problem solvers who would push technical capabilities into territories that hadn't yet been imagined. 15 years later, the memorial service was held at Arlington National Cemetery in a section reserved for military personnel, whose service had involved classified operations that could never be fully acknowledged. Maya stood among the assembled mourners, remembering David Rodriguez, the SEAL who had recognized Phoenix's potential and convinced her to return to the work that had defined her true purpose. David had died during a training accident, but his influence on American special operations capabilities would continue for generations through the people he had recruited, the missions he had planned, and the innovations he had encouraged. Maya knew that her own career, and the careers of dozens of other technicians and specialists, had been shaped by David's ability to see potential in unconventional places. After the service, Maya found herself talking with Rebecca Santos, who had driven down from Virginia Beach to attend the memorial for a man she had met only once, but whose impact on Maya's life had been impossible to ignore. "He changed everything for you, didn't he?" Rebecca said, looking across the cemetery's manicured landscape toward the distant Pentagon, where Maya had received recognition for contributions that would remain classified long after her death. "He helped me become who I was supposed to be," Maya replied, thinking about the journey from civilian life back to government service and the technical challenges that had defined her most meaningful work. "But I think he just recognized something that was already there." Rebecca smiled with the understanding that came from years of friendship with someone whose work remained largely mysterious, but whose satisfaction was undeniable. "The coffee machine at the cafe still works perfectly," she said. 15 years, and it's never needed another repair." Maya laughed, remembering the morning when David had first approached her while she was working on Coastline Cafe's espresso machine. "That's because I over-engineered the repair," she admitted. "I couldn't help myself even with coffee machines. I have to build in redundancies and safeguards." "Some things never change," Rebecca observed. "Some things shouldn't change," Maya corrected, thinking about the fundamental drive to fix broken systems that had guided her through military service, civilian life, and back to government work in increasingly challenging technical fields. 20 years later, Maya's granddaughter sat at the kitchen table in Maya's Virginia Beach home, struggling with calculus homework that seemed impossibly complex to a high school student, but reminded Maya of the mathematical foundations that had supported her most sophisticated technical work. "Grandma Maya," the teenager said, looking up from equations that described orbital mechanics, "why did you become an engineer?" Maya considered the question while preparing tea in the kitchen that had been updated several times over the years, but retained the essential character of a space designed for someone who appreciated precision and functionality over decoration. "I didn't set out to become an engineer," Maya said honestly. "I just wanted to fix things that were broken. Engineering was what I had to learn in order to fix increasingly complicated problems." "But why did you want to fix things?" her granddaughter pressed, with the kind of persistent curiosity that Maya recognized from her own childhood. Maya brought 2 cups of tea to the table and sat down across from her granddaughter, looking at a young face that showed signs of the same analytical intensity that had driven Maya's career. "Because broken things matter," Maya said. "When communication systems fail, people can't call for help. When spacecraft systems malfunction, missions fail and astronauts are endangered. When military equipment breaks down, soldiers' lives are at risk. Fixing broken things isn't just about technical puzzles, it's about taking care of people." Her granddaughter nodded thoughtfully, returning to homework that suddenly seemed connected to larger purposes than just academic requirements. Maya looked around her kitchen, seeing photographs from missions that couldn't be discussed in detail, awards that acknowledged contributions to national security and scientific advancement, and letters from people whose lives had been affected by her technical work over the course of a career that had spanned 4 decades. But the most meaningful objects were the simplest ones, tools that she still kept sharp and calibrated, ready for whatever technical challenge might arise, and a small framed photograph of herself standing beside an espresso machine at Coastline Cafe, taken on the morning when Phoenix had been awakened from civilian slumber by someone who recognized her true nature. 25 years later, the dedication ceremony for the Phoenix Institute of Advanced Technical Training was held at a facility that had been designed to prepare the next generation of technicians for challenges that hadn't yet been imagined. Maya stood at the podium, looking out at an audience that included former colleagues, current students, and family members who had supported her through a career that had taken her from coffee machine repairs to spacecraft communication systems. "Technical work," Maya began, her voice carrying clearly through the auditorium's advanced acoustic system, "is ultimately about service. We learn complex skills and master sophisticated equipment, not for personal satisfaction, but to maintain the systems that enable other people to accomplish missions that matter." She paused, seeing faces in the audience that represented different phases of her career: former team members from classified missions, students who had benefited from training programs she had developed, family members who had shared her journey from military service through civilian life and back to government work. "Some of you may find yourselves working on equipment that seems mundane: communication systems, transportation vehicles, manufacturing equipment that produces everyday products. But remember that every system matters to someone, and the quality of your work will determine whether other people can accomplish their missions successfully." Maya's eyes found her granddaughter in the audience, now a college student studying aerospace engineering with the same intense focus that had characterized Maya's own approach to technical challenges. Others may find yourselves working on projects that push the boundaries of what's technically possible: spacecraft communication systems, deep space exploration equipment, military systems that protect American interests in environments we can barely imagine. These challenges will test your skills and your creativity, but they will also provide the deep satisfaction that comes from work that truly matters. As Maya concluded her remarks and accepted recognition for the contributions that had made the Phoenix Institute possible, she reflected on the strange journey that had brought her from a small cafe in Virginia Beach to this moment of public acknowledgement for a career that had been largely classified and invisible. But the real measure of success wasn't the awards or recognition. It was the knowledge that her work had enabled other people to accomplish missions that protected lives, advanced scientific understanding, and enhanced American capabilities in an increasingly complex world. Phoenix had risen from the ashes of Maya's attempted civilian life and had spent decades proving that some people were meant for work that demanded excellence under pressure, innovation in the face of impossible challenges, and the willingness to fix whatever was broken, regardless of the personal cost. 30 years later, Maya Chun, now known throughout the technical community as Dr. Phoenix Chin, sat in her study late at night, working on the final chapters of a memoir that would be heavily redacted for security reasons but would preserve the essential lessons of a career dedicated to fixing the unfixable. The manuscript, titled Rising from the Ashes, Technical Innovation in Classified Environments, would be published only after review by multiple security agencies. But Maya hoped it would inspire future generations of technicians to pursue the kind of meaningful work that had defined her life. Her phone rang, displaying a number she didn't recognize but which carried the familiar area code of Virginia Beach. Maya answered with curiosity, wondering who would be calling so late in the evening. Dr. Chun, a young voice said, carrying the nervous excitement that Maya had learned to associate with junior technicians facing their first major technical challenge. This is Lieutenant Sarah Kim. I'm calling from a classified facility where we're dealing with a communication system failure that's beyond our current capabilities. Maya smiled, recognizing the pattern that had repeated throughout her career: impossible problems that required unconventional solutions. Young technicians who needed guidance from someone who had faced similar challenges, the eternal cycle of technical innovation driven by operational necessity. What kind of system? Maya asked, already beginning the mental process of analyzing potential failure modes and innovative repair approaches. Mars Colony Communication Array, Kim replied. Primary and backup systems have failed, and we've lost contact with a research team that was depending on Earth-based support for their mission. Maya felt the familiar surge of purpose and anticipation that had driven her for 3 decades of technical innovation. Even in retirement, even after years of training others to handle the challenges that had once been her exclusive domain, Phoenix couldn't ignore the call to fix what others couldn't repair. Send me the technical specifications, Maya said, reaching for the tablet that contained her personal collection of diagnostic tools and reference materials. I'll take a look and see what's possible. As Lieutenant Kim thanked her and promised to transmit the relevant documentation, Maya realized that some aspects of her nature would never change. Phoenix would always respond to technical challenges that mattered, would always find ways to restore critical systems that others had declared irreparable, would always rise from whatever ashes circumstances might create. The memoir could wait. Mars Colony Communication was a new frontier, and Phoenix had work to do. Final word count, 20,847 words at Coastline Cafe. Rebecca Santos still served customers using the same espresso machine that Maya had repaired 30 years earlier. The machine had never needed another significant repair, testament to the over-engineered excellence that Phoenix brought to every technical challenge, no matter how seemingly mundane. And sometimes, when steam rose from the espresso machines, chrome surface and the morning light caught the harbor beyond the cafe's windows, Rebecca would remember the quiet technician who had become something extraordinary, who had found her true calling in the most unlikely circumstances, and who had proven that some people were meant to fix the broken things that kept the world running. Phoenix had risen from the ashes of civilian anonymity to become a legend in classified circles, but her journey had begun with a simple repair. Job and a stranger who recognize the signs of greatness hidden in plain sight.